Привет, I'm Chuck Olenek. I was baptized with the name Yaroslav, and that's the name that I use in the Society for Creative Anachronism, where I am Kyr Yaroslav the Persistent, an 11th century Slavic tribesman, working as a black hat for the princes of Kiev. And today is Perun's Day, July 20th, and thought I would bring out my Perun idol that travels with me, and whenever I go to an event or I'm camping, and he lives at the top of the tent pole, and he's supposed to protect me against lightning. So we're going to talk about Perun, but we're actually going to talk about a holiday that basically is also occurring around that time, and it involves the summer rains. In case you weren't aware, Perun is the Slavic god of thunder. He's also the god of justice and of war. Of all historic records describing Slavic gods, those mentioning Perun are the most numerous. There are references to him in the writings of Procopius. He was Belisarius's secretary. That's back in the 6th century. The primary chronicle relates that in the year 6415, 907 AD, Prince Oleg, in the Old Norse that's Helgi, made peace with the Byzantine Empire, and by taking his men to the shrines and swearing by their weapons and by their god Perun and by Volos, the god of cattle, they confirmed the treaty. Prince Ihor, in 945, made the same form of confirmation of a peace treaty. In 980, when Prince Volodymyr the Great came to the throne of Kiev, he erected statues of 7 pagan gods at Starokievska, Old Kiev Hill, dedicated to Perun and other gods. And this Perun was a god that was favored by members of the prince's druzhina. Then Volodymyr became a Christian. The reasons why and how I've talked about elsewhere. Since he was a new convert and prince, he had his people baptized along with him and the idols torn down, dragged through the streets of Kiev, and flung into the mighty Dnipro River. So, the old faith was to die out. Right, so Perun is going to become Ilya or Elijah. The goddess Mokosh, she's going to become known as Paraskeva Pyatnitsa, Paraskeva Friday, to Slavic Orthodox Christians, and you kind of get the idea. But remnants of the old faith hung on. A Mokridy was an offering to Mokosh. Now we're going to offer that to Paraskeva Pyatnitsa. Usually it was represented by a combed amount of flax or flax threads that were cast into a well or left near a sacred spring dedicated to Friday. Women who made such offerings usually said at this, "I give this so that Paraskeva can make herself some stockings," or "to Mother Friday for an apron." And while Perun's holiday took place on July 20th, this was preceded by a slightly less famous celebration which began usually on July 19th. It's called Mokridy, or Mokrine, or Mokridy. And the new Christian date, right, new calendar, August 1st. And it was a holiday of summer rains, and in late July and early August, that's a time where you'd get thunderstorms in eastern Slavic lands. This isn't like the Rasputitsa, the spring and autumn seasons of roadlessness. If you've been seeing anything about the war in Ukraine, and you'd see reports during spring or autumn, everything is bogged down in the mud. But you are getting thunderstorms, which of course make people think of Perun. All right, what if it's not raining? Okay, if this didn't happen, women performed special ritual actions called Mokridy in order to summon the rain. Or you may have the situation of there's too much rain and they're trying to send it away. So the main character in this ritual is Mokridy, a woman who was born around this time. Best of her birthday actually fell on July 19th. Such a woman was dressed in her holiday clothing. Other women brought her kernels of grain, and Mokridy, the woman playing Mokridy, had to take them to the river and cast them in the water so that the river water would take these kernels to the other world with the plea for rain. According to another version of the ritual, Mokridy entered the water with a sheaf of grain and lowered it into the water and made sure that it sank completely. Now, if there's too much rain, the rains are really extensive, Mokridy was told, you got to stay home. And that was to prevent heavy rain from damaging the crops. So a lot of these rain rituals are about, well, survival, but also prosperity, all right? Because, hey, the more grain you have, the more you can sell. How do we know about this stuff? Ethnographers, all right? They're playing anthropologists, essentially, because, okay, I'm fascinated by this stuff since my degree's in anthropology. Ethnographers were making records of this like in 1854 in the Russian north. And in that part of Russia, the pagan stuff is hanging on real strong, and it's hard to get rid of. All right, and they ended up describing Mokridy as a holiday in which everybody's participating, young and old, and in the morning everybody gathers in a sacred spot for prayers and celebration, and later on the families kind of separate to do their own celebration, and they're still on the sacred grounds, and then they come back together, and celebration would be lasting until evening. Then everyone's heading back to the river, or they've got a special bathing spot organized, and people stand in the water waist high. Some people are probably still standing on the bank. After this, everyone gets out of the water, go back to the sanctuary for a ritual of gratitude, because remember, trying to summon rain, right? They need the rain. And finally, everyone boards their boats, head back to the village, and the celebration could be continuing until morning. It might go on into the next day. This isn't just a northern Russian thing. In southern Slavic regions, there were rain-making rituals involving Perun and Dodola of the couple Perun, Peruna, or Perunika, Lord and Lady Thunder. And you'll find something similar in Lithuania, Perkunas and Dundulis or Pekuna. Girls dressed in greenery had water poured on them in an ancient ritual to summon the rain, and there was a ritual character that these girls portrayed, and they're being called, Perperuna or Paparuda. One of the names for the goddess of rain was Dodola or Diva Dodola. And of course, we Slavs are very big on dolls and effigies. My Tonka travels with me and also keeps me company in the tent. So I'm getting lots of protection. All right, so different dolls and different effigies. They're involved in different events. So there's one for Mokridy. This one has 6 arms. And actually, there's 2 different dolls. Mokridina and Suhoveka. Mokridina, okay, mokre, wet. The doll made in wet weather, and you are getting way too much rain, and you need a dry spell. All right, and there's fresh greenery and moisture-loving plants, which were attached to her 6 arms. The 6 arms, they're symbolizing a very busy Slavic woman at harvest season who has to work in the rain. Although I have seen other depictions of six-armed goddesses. Okay, then there's Suhoveka, and this is the doll that's made during a drought. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to encourage the rain, and women are tying bits of cloth soaked in Kupala's dew, or because the Ivan Kupala season just passed, right? And even in soaking this in small buckets, if it's like a really, really bad drought, and if the previous ritual didn't help. Okay, so why are we looking at this stuff? Well, I said, I'd studied anthropology, and when I was a history teacher, I tended to teach it from the anthropologist's point of view, to look at cultures. And this isn't about, we're going to go out and do witchy stuff. This is about people were doing it, and they believed in this. And maybe this gives us another insight into a culture area that you're studying or you're interested in. Or maybe it's a way to flesh out the persona that you have or that you are creating. So, happy Perun's Day and happy Mokridy.